Okay, welcome to Monday Night Ignite. You may think that this is Jill on call, but it's Pamela Hunter. I'm helping out the diamonds that are in Hawaii still. You know that Stacy and Jill usually do this call and some of the others. And they asked me to help out. I'm Pamela Hunter. I've been using oils for 20 plus years, and I'm happy to be here tonight with our wonderful speaker, Dr. Cindy Haggerton. She's going to be talking bellies to babies, preconception, pregnancy, and birth tune in as Young Living Crown Diamond. Dr. Cindy Haggerton shares her wealth of knowledge on babies and pregnancy. Come learn how to support the health of mom and baby with natural products that all moms should have in their wellness toolkit. Cindy is a chiropractor, midwife, and doula, and after a decade of owning their business, Cindy and her husband both sold their practice and now teach about wellness from their home. Wow. They're super passionate about teaching how the body works so that people can take control of their health and naturally heal. All right, and then after them tonight, or after Cindy tonight, we have Brand Partner Experience Product Training for Biz Success. Stay on the same link as Young Living Senior Manager of Training Francesca and Brand Partner Training Manager, I think Stacy is her name, share about Young Living's Brand Partner Experience. And I think we have a comp plan expert joining us tonight as well. So we've got back-to-back calls. We'll take a little intermission in between the calls, and we'll give it to you, Dr. Cindy, and please explain anything more that you want to explain about yourself, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Pamela. I appreciate your help so much. I know how much it takes to navigate these calls, especially under somebody else's Zoom name. So super appreciate you tonight. Okay, little caveat as we get started. If you have heard me speak before, you're probably already laughing about this, but I get it every time. So I've just started opening the calls by saying, yay, that this is recorded. There's a lot of information. I always chuckle when I get asked to present this topic because inevitably it gets sandwiched into this whole, let's talk preconception and pregnancy and babies, which in and of themselves could be broken up into individual topics. And then we add on the fact that we're in Young Living world where we have so many awesome products to cover and support. And so I want to honor your time, and time is a commodity that we don't get back when we give it. And so we appreciate and do not take for granted that you guys are spending your evening here with us. And I want to make that super useful. So I will do so by talking really fast. So if that overwhelms you, know that this is being recorded, and the person that invited you to this call has a way to get a hold of me. And so if you have specific questions, if they start popping up in the chat, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just to honor time because I know that we have a lot to get covered. Also in that, I love so much, and it was one of our favorite things in practice. Hold on just a second. If somebody can help me mute and then just tell your friends as they come on, that'll help with the recording too, because I don't want you guys getting distracted with a lot of the background issues. But Young Living, one of the greatest things about this topic is that we get asked questions a lot. Okay, how do I dilute, or is it safe, to use on this and X, Y, and Z? And so something that attracted me so much to this company is not only this community, which we'll get into why you want that, but the fact that we have, when looking at our products, or if you're online and you're scrolling through, most of the reference books that you get are going to be really thick. You can see Pamela's wall behind her is a great example of this, that we have hundreds of products. And so you may hear me mention tonight a product that you're like, man, I wouldn't use that as my top one for that. I have another favorite. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong or you're wrong. It just means that our bodies function differently. And you may have come up on something that as an individual works better for you than the one that I mentioned. But because this is such a vast topic and there's so many products that we can choose from, I just want to hone in on some of my top ones. If you are new to this world, know that we are all each where we're at in our journey for a reason. And our only goal is to get better tomorrow than what we are today. And so there's no condemnation. I don't want you to sit here and pick apart or have regret. We just want to focus on, hey, what one thing can I take away from this call? You know, in my years, when she mentioned all of my training, I've sat through, as you can probably guess, a lot of lectures that I was like, meh, meh, like maybe the speaker doesn't resonate with you, or maybe you didn't think, you know, that you had something to learn there. But even in the worst of any talk that I've sat through, I always attempt to grab some sort of meat out of that I can walk away and use. And so in that tonight, I want to give you guys some big nuggets. And if you're new on this, we don't want you to get overwhelmed, because what happens with overwhelm, and especially with parents, especially if you're new on this parenting journey, I saw someone mention in the chat, hey, I'm pregnant. It can get really exciting, but yet we can shut down when we start getting overwhelmed, right? And so although I'm going to mention a lot, this is just a big menu for you to be able to have a wide variety of choices to choose from, and something to make one change tonight that you can see improvement on for you and your family. We did choose to specialize in this in practice, as she was mentioning. And so, yes, I've had a lot of years, but as much as I can appreciate a professional and the information that they can bring to stuff and their years of practice and yada, yada, yada. Something that is more important to me is somebody who is walking that out firsthand. And so I want you to know tonight that you're also not only hearing from who she read on that, but as a mom who has birthed. And so we have 6 children, 5 who are here. They range in age from the oldest being 13 all the way down to a year old. She's almost 2, but I'm still going to call her a year old. And we've also adopted. And then as far as birth settings, I have had them all from water birth to out of water to at home to birth center and hospital. And so chances are, if you are looking for something in my story that you can identify with, I've been there and I have utilized our products through all of those scenarios. And so hopefully if you hear something in that is of help to you as to who you're hearing from, then that can serve you tonight. All right, so let's delve in and talk on these high points. Know that if you have seen me in practice tonight, I'm just a mom sharing some helpful information for you. And so this is not to diagnose you or cure or treat you. If you hear something, I don't care whether it's from me or another professional or another mom or dad or whatever the letters are behind their name. I want to encourage you guys to research and make your choices for yourself. You are the gatekeeper in your home. And so guess what? If you're on this call tonight because you're like, hey, I'm out of those years, or I'm a fur mom and I never had, human babies in this pregnancy thing, or I'm an adoptive parent or a dad even, or wherever you find yourself on this journey, there is something of value to everyone in this call, whether you're in this particular season or not, because guess what? We are going to talk health and hormones, which affects us in all seasons of life, even our babies that are in our bellies right now. And so I love this subject for that reason. But the other thing that I really loved and really jived with talking about this when we were in practice is that the choices that we make not only affect us personally, and I don't know why we have to have somebody else that it affects sometimes to be open to things that we wouldn't want to choose to make changes in for ourselves. But this subject seems to open up people in this season in their life when they're choosing to grow their family to make changes that they might not otherwise be open to. And so, for instance, if a couple came into us and they're like, hey, we want your expertise in practice because we're working on fertility, and maybe they're on an infertility journey, if we want to put a name on that particularly. And so we would always tell them, hey, you know what? Our big goal in this is to help you on your health journey. And in that, if the side effect of you getting healthier is that you're able to grow your family and a child comes as the byproduct of that, then awesome. We are super happy for you in that aspect of your health journey. But if I only focus on, hey, I want this, child journey to be as such, that's only one season, and things that may be an issue in that right now that are showing us, hey, we're not on that wellness line of things, are going to affect us much later in life outside of that season that's just exclusive to childbearing. And so our overall goal and focus in this, we want it to be health. The other thing is that the research shows that yes, our health choices affect us, but it's much more than that. They affect generations down the line, depending on what research study you'll pick up, specifically to epigenetics. That tells us that stuff isn't genetic. It's based on the results that we get or based on the choices. Like if I was in a library, you may have all these books in your genetic library library that could be in your family line and things that were in your family, but your choices are what pull down and open up those books that you're going to read. And so the great news about that is that there are things that we are in control of, that we can have awesome results with the products that we have that Young Living offers us. But there's other things that are outside of our control, like what my neighbor, sprays his yard with, that I can't put stress on that because it's something that's outside of my control. And so I want to control what I can control, my choices that will affect those future generations, maybe not knowing or liking, the choices that my grandparents made. But if I'm talking with a mom and her health, and maybe she knows she wants to grow her family, and so we're in that preconception before she's conceived phase, when we're talking about her choices, it's going to affect her and then her baby that she conceives, right? And so that's one generation. But if that child happens to be a girl, what do we know about the female fetus? They carry their entire lifetime of eggs in utero. And so now we've got her affecting her child and then her grandkids. Some of the research for people who fought in World War II shows that their generations after them in their family line have a quicker ability to bring on that stress response because that part of their brain is already sensitized. And so it's amazing how we think so often that our choices only affect us, but really it opens us up into future generations. And so if we don't desire to make those changes for ourselves, maybe those future generation choices and knowing that that is there will make us put some work into these things that we're talking about with the preconception and with pregnancy and then birth and infancy, okay? All right. Remember that you are the gatekeeper. Again, if my team is on here, you've heard me speak before, I talk about that a lot. And so the things, that we allow or don't in our home, we're in control of that. And so again, if I say something on here, I want to encourage you to go and grab something and research that. What's in it? Why would you utilize that and get peace for yourself and for your home before you allow that in or maybe choose to keep it out? Some of my favorite resources, and I want you guys to know when we started on this Young Living journey, there were few and far between as compared to what there are today. And even if there was back then, the old editions, the new ones, they have so improved upon. And so we are so blessed not only to have this community that has stories, which to me are so much more valuable, firsthand experience. I want to hear from somebody else on this call versus just, what some random blogger that I may not know what their agenda is, what the experiences are. But we've got some great resources. And so some of my favorites are little pocket desk references. These are great, but if you don't have the big college textbook size, avail yourself to that. And so the essential oil desk reference, we now have an app, the Life Steps app. There's a free version, fantastic, full of information in that. If you get confused navigating that, it just tells me that you haven't done it enough. And so make a practice of being in there once a day, and you'll get to where it becomes like you're more sensitized to it and things are easier to find, right? And so you can learn a lot about products. You can take a wellness assessment in there if you're feeling overwhelmed, like where do I start? That is a great place. And so that app is fantastic. For this subject, and you may have the older version, but one of our awesome RCDs who has been around forever and ever wrote a new version, and I highly recommend. You can see it's quite a bit thicker than the old one, but Gentle Babies, and I'll pull some information and then you guys can read. And so I don't want to waste your time reading you things on a call tonight. And so we'll talk about other things, but grab this book when you want to know, like, hey, is that safe to use or not? She's got some specifics in here. And so if you are talking pregnancy or children and you don't have this book, it's definitely one that you want to get. And then we'll hit on one of our favorite supplements a lot, Ningxia. And so this is another one that I love for information on that. And if you don't know where to grab these resources, you can talk to the person that invited you on this call, but you'll just hear a few of those. And then I can recommend that you reference back to that as we get through this information. Okay, so if you have heard me speak on this subject before, I always like to open up by touching on this because it is the big elephant in the room. And if you haven't heard that it is, you'll find out as you start utilizing these products and talking about them. But it doesn't take me a second. I could like run a contest right now and tell you guys, hey, go jump on Facebook or go Google search for a blog to tell you, hey, don't use XYZ on your child or during pregnancy. And so I'm here as that firsthand story and community to tell you, like I just said at the beginning of this, that I have utilized this through my pregnancies on all of my children. I like to think that they are awesome and I am a fan of theirs. And so take that for what it is to you, but we love these products in our household. And so you do you, but just some firsthand experience. What I want you to know, there are two things that I filter through when I'm reading just, random, whatever it is, the soup du jour of the day of information on the interwebs, or from the friend who comes along to fearmonger and tell you don't do this. I want to know if they're talking Young Living products specifically. I can't speak to whatever other XYZ brand because I don't know. And so again, that's for you. But what I love about Young Living is that I have not found another company that can guarantee my seed to seal on there. The print is on our bottles. I can call the company. We own a lot of our farms, right? And then we have rigorous things that we have to go through in order to take that seed and get it sealed off to the bottle that is sold to you. When things go out of stock, if you guys were around for Valorgate, Young Living could easily put things in there, chemicals that I don't want to use on my family, and stick something on a shelf to sell to us, but they don't, right? Because if we don't have the raw material, or if something doesn't pass the test, they're not going to sell us something just to make a buck. And so as a mom, as a consumer period, but especially as a gatekeeper in my home, and when I'm talking a season that is as sensitive as pregnancy and then with babies, that is really, really important to me. And so if somebody just says, hey, don't use peppermint, I want to know, okay, are we just talking peppermint that I picked up from the health food store, whatever brand, or am I talking Young Living specifically? Secondly to that, outside of brands, I don't know if you know this, but there are several different thoughts and schools when we're talking about essential oils, aromatherapy in particular. There is the most common, which is French and British that you'll hear about, and then there's also German. And you need to know that Young Living and Gary comes out of the French model of thought. And so with that, if you hear somebody say, hey, we don't ingest oils. Well, the reason why we put oils in our supplements and have vitality is that in the French model, there is ingestion of the oils. There's also the topical application. And then there's also where we smell it and use that olfactory sense, right? And so if we're not talking the same language as far as oil use, because we're from a different school of thought, then that conversation, just like if I was speaking in French and Pamela is speaking in English and we don't have a translator in between us, that's probably not going to go very far. Right. And so you need to be on the same page, not only with the company that you're utilizing and the recommendations that you're going to hear somebody like me make on Young Living tonight, and know that you have the same goal in mind and the same agenda. And so that is a really big thing, not to just take, hey, I just read, somebody's Facebook post and they told me not to do this. And then the other thing is that if you don't have peace in that whole gatekeeper conversation in our home, if we don't have peace on something, we don't move forward until we do. And so you do you and go with what you're comfortable with. And for me, that's always with research. And so hopefully this call and the resources that we recommend and then our firsthand experience is going to help you with that. And then you can talk to whoever invited you to this call, because chances are they're a part of a wider team with a lot of different experiences on there. And so if my experience doesn't resonate with you, or you don't like the way I teach, then you can find somebody in that community who does. And that is the beauty of this model of how we do things with Young Living. And so I just always want to open up and mention that. So anytime that we talk about, hey, why is this coming up, or this is our goal, we need to know in health that I don't want to just know symptoms. Pregnancy, when we're talking about this needs to be said, because especially in the Western, it's getting better, I feel like, but in this Western culture, so often we deem pregnancy or symptoms that are normal to pregnancy as something of illness, and it is not if we look at how the body is created. And so I had a professor when I was taking my pregnancy certification, and she said, sometimes you're going to go and research and there'll be peer-reviewed stuff there for what you're looking for, and sometimes there won't. And so when the research isn't there, go to physiology and know how the body is created to know why it works the way that it does. And so tonight, in talking pregnancy, I'm not going to talk about infertility, even though I'm going to talk to you about hormones and the things that we can do in order to support those and get them to work and get them on that wellness line and balance. But if something has gone awry, or if we want to support it, if we look at the root cause and not actually what is going on, but why it is going on, there's only two reasons why your body that is created for health will veer from that. It's either because we have a toxicity where the body's getting something that is not made to get, or we have a deficiency where it's meant to get something that it is not receiving. And so when you're thinking gatekeeper, how can I keep those things in, that bring them in that my body needs? How can I keep those things out to keep those toxicities away that it doesn't? The problem is when we talk generational things, or when I was mentioning that thing about my neighbor, or what, maybe outside of your home that you can't control, we don't know where our burden lies and where my body sensitivity comes into where my bowl, if you want to picture it, that says, hey, I'm full and that toxic burden is here and you're here. And so now I'm going to start throwing symptoms. When we bring a baby on board, because of its size and the stress that we require, because now mom's organs aren't only supporting her body, but it's supporting one other person, so two at minimum. And then if we have multiples, we get into further discussion. And so when we put stress on that body, chances are that body is going to show more sensitivity to things. And so maybe we get nausea, because what's that nausea going to do? I don't want you to think in the Western mindset of like, oh, I'm nauseated, something's wrong. Maybe if her toxic burden is already high, then that nausea comes on sooner or more, prone to that than other moms might be, because her body is going to be protective, right? And so it's not an illness thing. It's a thing of the body going, guess what? If I make her nauseated, she's not going to bring in food that's going to hurt this teeny tiny baby. Maybe because mom's body will always sacrifice, because that's what it does. And it's a beautiful thing, in order to grow and do what baby needs. And so maybe she's deficient in minerals. And so she's going to start throwing these symptoms to show her like, hey, I'm giving this all off to baby. You need to provide me something that I'm made to get that I'm not receiving. And so we need to filter it through that, but always going back to, because I can throw a ton of symptoms out there. And not only does that not get us in the conversation that we're wanting to have here of how do I support her so that she stays on that wellness line? How do I support him so that as they're coming together to grow this family, he stays on that wellness line? And so if something is veering off from that, or if I need to know, hey, how can I best support this so that it functions optimally? What am I getting that I'm not meant to have? Or what do I mean to have that I'm not receiving that is creating a deficiency? Okay, so the importance of that, and why everyone on this call was saying can grasp something from it, is that estrogen dominance, you've probably heard that term, is huge right now. And so when we talk about fertility and hormones, and again, this is going to play into both when we're looking at, hey, let's get everything right so that we can grow this family, to then, okay, we're pregnant, to then, hey, the baby's here. All of us are going to be affected by these stats that I'm going to mention, and with hormones. There's some heavy hitters. Of course, we can talk in the hormone world about a ton of things, but in the hormones, we want to look at the fact that the male is going to cycle through his hormones in a 24-hour period, and the female, it's roughly going to take about a month too. In resources, if you want to learn more about this, and again, this is such a fun subject as my daughter starts getting closer into the teen years, and then my sons, I love that we can have conversations about how their bodies are created and naturally work. And so if you are one that wasn't raised in like, hey, this is what's happening, learn it for yourself so that then you can be a teacher of that, and they can grow up accustomed to like what true health is, so that if something veers off of that, they know how to address it, right? And so there is a book called Taking Charge of Your Fertility that's awesome, both for males and females, but it goes through this whole in-depth hormone stuff. And so I'm going to pull some information in there for you guys. But when we're talking about this, we want to look at the endocrine system. And so you've probably heard of the thyroid, and the adrenals is all in that. And so we'll touch on that a little bit. And then we also want to talk about estrogen and progesterone, and then testosterone. When I mentioned that estrogen dominance, something that you need to know about that female cycle, for the male, we're mostly going to talk testosterone, but estrogen and progesterone, even though in a smaller quantity, do affect his system. And we want to see that ratio in balance. For the female, if you hear estrogen dominance, it's not so much, even though, yes, I will look at the numbers if she has them for me of what her estrogen is doing, but I want to see what the ratio is doing, because in her month-long cycle of what's taking place with that, and about, if it's textbook, which nobody is. And so Learn Your Body, which is what that Taking Charge of Your Fertility will take you through if that is new information to you. And then we'll talk about when to support that physiologically with our oils and which one to use in the first part of her cycle. And so when her period comes, the first day that she has that menses, the first day of blood is day 1. And then it goes all the way until 28 is textbook. So a lot go a little bit over that, right? And then that first day of blood is when it starts over again. And so that first half of her cycle, from day 1 of her bleeding until she ovulates, estrogen is going to be the key player there. And so estrogen should be, out of all the times in the cycle, higher. And then at its peak, we'll get ovulation, and then that estrogen will drop off and progesterone will come up until she starts her period. And so progesterone is on that second half. The problem is that most of the things that we encounter are in our environment, and why you are in such a fantastic place. And I can tell you two things tonight that you can swap out. If you do nothing else but that off of this call, you will make a vast change in a system that is being bombarded with estrogen. Is that most of our toxins that we come into contact with are going to stimulate this estrogen. And so we are being bombarded in our household, outside. And so we're going to work on the areas that we can control to slow that down, right? And so when that estrogen is bombarded and it's constantly coming in, and it's not just for the females in the first half of that cycle, and then for the males, what do you think is happening to testosterone if I'm constantly giving him the surge of what is typically a more feminine hormone of that estrogen high? Is it any surprise that we have infertility rates going through the roots, breast cancer, other cancers of the reproductive system, and so on and so forth? And so I could read you off a list, but I won't waste your time on that. Go Google symptoms of estrogen dominance, which they're calling, estrogen dominance, but it really comes into play when there is an imbalance. And where do we get those things? From plastics, from what I was telling you that you could change things out, synthetic cleaners, anything that you turn the label over and read fragrance. Fragrance is a catch-all word that can mean hundreds of different chemicals that they don't have to disclose to us. And what do you think after 2020, when we were put into this bubble of everything needs to be sanitized, fear psychologically on the emotional point of that drives that too. And so you better believe that those estrogen rates just went all over. Studies back in 2011 found that males, there was over 47% of men who had low testosterone. I would venture to say that because we're talking about this over a decade later tonight, and if your area is anything like mine and you see these low T centers popping up all over the place, it is a much larger problem. And I would venture to say even more than that, that estrogen is at play here. Studies show that 50% of women are estrogen dominant, which can lead to early puberty, cancers, cysts, fibroids, infertility. Do you think that's going to affect what we're talking about tonight? Absolutely. Not only do we have to look at where we are picking it up, but how to help the body get rid of it. And so that is really huge too, because if we make those changes of, hey, it's not coming in anymore, but we've come to this call, whether through the choices of our grandparents and our great grandparents, and we have a high level of that, if our body, i.e. our digestive system, and I love that Pamela at the onset of this call was talking about our Jiva products, because supporting your liver and making sure that we're having consistent bowel movements and that our skin is detoxing through sweat, all of that is going to be really, really key to getting this estrogen out of our system, which guarantee if you're limiting your exposure to that, you're still getting exposed through ways that you can't control by what people are randomly, spraying on foods, what your neighbor is putting outside as fertilizer, the aerosol that they're spraying. If you're traveling, like she was mentioning, we're just exposed to it all over the place. And so we want to make sure that that elimination is in place. Endocrine disruptors, 98% of people have measurable plastic levels in their bloodstream. It was found that, this statistic grosses me out, the average person consumes a credit card's worth of plastic each week just by what they're exposed to in these disruptors. So yes, it is key that we make sure that we're not contributing to that by what we're utilizing around us in the areas that we can control, but also that we're getting that to excrete through our system working healthily, right? So how do we do this? What were those two changes that I mentioned? I don't know if you've seen it floating around. There was a post, and I feel like in the last 2 days, it's come up in my feed a ton. So you've probably seen it too, talking about how there was a specific company that sells fragrancy stuff and how they were hiding on their labels that it's actually not approved for use during pregnancy. Fertility clinics too, you can ask people who work in those, but they are not allowed to bring fragrances into those environments. And so obviously, if we're talking hormones, there's a reason for that, right? And so the latest research shows that the new secondhand smoke risk is actually coming from fragrances. And after 2020, how many people do you think came home? And so if we didn't work to clean out that home environment, where are we exposed to that all of the time? Think about moms who are a stay at home, who are this population coming to us like, okay, I want to grow my family. And if we're using synthetic things all over the place, not only do we look at how that's affecting hers and her spouse's hormones. But then also when we bring this baby on board, I love the budget friendly side of our products, that I can make these changes now, and then it's going to benefit my children later on too, and make my job as a parent when that baby comes easier, because then I'm not worried about what they're getting exposed to as they're crawling around on the floor or licking the countertops as they're learning to eat, or if a cabinet is left open. And so we not only are getting, results out of these changes now that we're getting our budget into and making changes on, but our future self and family is going to thank us for that. Now, as we talk about these different products too, one of the ways that I have experienced new products that I love, and maximizing this, decide where your budget is at, because we're going to go through a lot, and then set it at a level where Young Living every month gives you freebies. And then you can do our subscribe to save, which I love as a mom now with 5 kids at home. My least favorite thing to do is like, hey, let's load you up in the car and go to the store. And so the fact that Young Living will send me a box and I can customize every month, you can, as I'm talking, make a list of like, okay, that's a good point. This is something that I want to prioritize and get on hand. And then just decide your budget. And every month, based on that tier that you set that budget at, Young Living will likely send you some freebies to try. And you may have never thought to order that thing that they send, but then you might, fall in love with that as you try it for these. And so that is a great way to start proactively making these changes. And so Thieves Household Cleaner, that one product, it's a concentrate. Not only has it saved me so much money, but it has replaced all of the cleaning supplies in our home. And so I love the easy button with that. But think about, even you could just go pull like several bottles if you haven't switched over in your home, and look at the ingredients and research those right now. Our skin is our biggest organ. And who do you think is exposed to that? In the home, you're likely walking around barefoot, right? As you have those babies come into play, or children in your home, they're exposed to whatever that is off-gassing. If you're eating off of those things, I can think of no better easy button than to start to make a change with and to talk to your friends and family about. If you just chose to make that one change and you're like, I'm going to get off this call, then your hormones will forever thank you, and that of future generations. And so I love that as we start delving into this. And then, like I said, I don't have to worry if my kids want to help me with it or if they get into it in an open cabinet, because I trust the ingredients in that. And it's awesome to be able to clean and have things that aren't, burning my lungs or have nausea during pregnancy because I'm sensitive to something that I'm not supposed to be exposed to. That whole line of products are Thieves Fruit and Veggie Wash. If you look at glyphosate, which is a chemical that they put in most of your produce if you're not purchasing organic. And so if that's something that you're unfamiliar with or haven't budgeted right now, then I would definitely have that Thieves Household Cleaner. The Thieves Fruit and Veggie Wash, sorry. You can also do it with household cleaner, but the Thieves Fruit and Veggie Wash, that soak is made for that. And so that is awesome to clean whatever off of your fruits and vegetables that you may not have been in control of until they get in your home. And then that is going to add less load to your liver, which again, like we talked about, your progesterone, a lot of your key hormones that we talk about with fertility. We want that liver not only clearing things through, but also in a healthy place where it can help to produce those hormones. And so the more that we can take stress off of that with cleaning supplies, both for household and then looking at our foods, those are 2 great products to start with. I touched on it briefly, but your fragrances are huge. And so if we're using, whether that's room sprays, fresheners, plugins, or candles, go ahead and make the switch. Young Living now allows you to open an account. So if you're invited to this call and you're like, I've never used this stuff, I don't know where to start. They have starter bundles, and they call them that for a reason, because that's a great place to start. But what's awesome now is they have opened up the choice for us to open an account with anything that we choose. And so if you're like, hey, I just want to do that Thieves Household Cleaner, you could absolutely open up your account with that. But I love the starter bundles. And so you're going to want a diffuser, especially when we're talking pregnancy. And then when we get into birth and your babies, because it's your sleep secret. I'll explain that in a minute. But those starter bundles with a diffuser, if you don't have one of those on hand, Young Living's diffusers have a proprietary plastic in them, because we don't want to heat these oils up. When we start talking about that, they will lose their therapeutic benefits. And so we'll talk about some things that you might love in your diffuser to replace that candle, so that you're not getting these synthetic fragrances in the air that are throwing off your hormones. But sometimes we might suggest an oil or a supplement that you're like, it's not my favorite smell, it's not my favorite taste. that's okay, because I'm going to explain tonight why you're doing it. And a lot of times when you understand it mentally, you can do hard things, especially when you know it's going to affect your health in a good way. And we'll work through some of those emotions and those toxins that you may be used to consuming. And then once those are out of your system, you may change the way that you feel about that certain product, right? And then, like I said, hundreds of products. If you don't like a certain one, you can go with another, okay? So changing over to a diffuser and those oils for that, so that we're not releasing chemicals into the air. Those two things with the Thieves household cleaner and switching that diffuser and your oils instead of those candles and plugins and aerosol, huge changes on your hormones right there that will benefit your whole family. Okay, when we're talking about male and female, what's another big ticket change that we can get a lot of bang for our buck and a lot of results from? Endoflex. It is one of our powerhouse blends for supporting this endocrine system, because we know that the ovaries, the testes, the adrenal glands, the liver, the thyroid are all involved, and then others, in producing these hormonal, which are chemicals, hormones, that are going to go off and being produced by these glands, go through the bloodstream and tell your organs what to do and when to do it. Because they are produced by so many things, how can we best support those? Support that endocrine system with that Endoflex blend. It smells great. You can use it on mom and dad and on baby and so on up. We have a little joke that a lot of times, you know, parents will think like, oh, it's a no-brainer to support their digestive system, or then when they're older, we're going to support their neurology so they can focus on school. But for some reason, they avoid, like in the toddler and baby years, talking about supporting the hormonal system, because that's not a buzzword until the teen years. But really, every milestone that, even like from birth, the baby starts getting stressors. When there is stress on a system, no matter the age, that hormonal system needs support. And what is so awesome about plant juices and supplements that are infused, it doesn't work like a medication. And so if you're in this Western mindset of thinking, oh, you're going to prescribe me something for a symptom, well, I've already told you we're talking pregnancy, which is just let's support healthy systems that are doing what they're supposed to do. But when we work with plants, plants support the body. And so if Pamela's levels are really high, but my levels are really low, when a plant comes in and supports the system, it just helps get that system back to the wellness level, right? And so it is your easy button. So we love things like the Endoflex blend that not only supports several organ systems, but that everybody can use, because I can invest in it once. And maybe that initially was for me, but now when a baby comes, I can utilize it on my children, and then my husband can utilize it too. So our favorite way, I love that she was saying she didn't have roller balls in her house. I don't either. I'm not a DIYer, not because I just don't, like, give me the easy button. And so you take that Endoflex bottle, if you want to put a roller on it, go for it. And then right over your thyroid. So you could just, if you don't know where that's at, just go front of the neck, right? And then over those adrenal glands, they set on top of your kidneys. And so back of the rib cage where somebody would kidney punch you, rub it on both areas. I love doing that first thing in the morning. And then in the afternoon around that lull time, like after you've had lunch, if you have a child that's like showing some stress or they're having a tantrum, rub it on them in the same areas. If you want to dilute it a little bit more with children, have at it. You can research that for you, but that Endoflex is awesome. We need a healthy digestive system in order to have healthy hormones. And then that is really important in pregnancy, right? Things like gestational diabetes or constipation or hemorrhoids or heartburn, those don't come up because you're sick in pregnancy. What those tell us, it's that whole adage of like, this is happening for you, not to you, right? And so what I love about pregnancy is that it is natural stress on a system to tell you, hey, that area was already under stress. I just pushed it a little bit over by having you grow a baby. And so we can use that to our benefit to go, hey, this system is telling me I need a little bit more help over here. And so that digestive system, if mom didn't know already that it was stress, maybe, you know, as she's working on her hormones, if we're having a hormone conversation, digestion definitely needs to come up. But then when we add baby on, and as she's growing baby and her body's working for hers and this baby, of course, we may see some stress on that digestive system because it's now working for two, right? And so I love our Digize oil. Again, it may not be one that you love the smell of. You can utilize Tummy Jize, which is our kid version of that, but my kids like the Digize even better because it just packs a more powerful punch, right? And so Digize, not only great for mom and dad to get those those hormones where we want them to be as they're talking about growing this family. But then guess what? You've got this bottle on hand. When baby comes along and we want some digestive support there, it is fantastic. Life 9, which is our probiotic. If you haven't researched microbiome and why you want to see balance in that gut bacteria and how that plays into our hormones, is huge. And then if we aren't having those consistent bowel movements in order to help with that liver and moving those hormones through that we've been exposed to our whole life, then you may want to look at some of the cleanses and the other digestive health that Young Living offers. And so talk to the person that invited you on this call, because there's a lot of that. For that liver support, not only did Pamela mention the Juvo, which are great options, we have another blend called GLF. And then any of your citrus oils are fantastic for that liver support. And so you can put your Vitality ones that you love the taste of in your drinks. Think about with your water, if you're hydrating during the day, and you're going to get this recommendation during pregnancy, especially, right? Like over half your body weight in water. We don't want to dilute a system that is probably already in deficiency. And so I love that we can add in good nutrients to that water as we're helping our hydration. And so think about our electrolyte drops, our Vitality drops, which are great to add in. Our mineral essence, you may not love the taste of it, but especially at this time, and if you don't like the taste, you likely need it a little bit more. So spoiler, that's your bad news for the night. But you can do hard things, because most of us are deficient in minerals, and we need those minerals for all these bodily processes, right? And so when you hear that hydration, whether it's before pregnancy or during, or then when we're talking breastfeeding for baby, I want you to think, what can I add to this water in order to get more out of this? And so those are great. So putting that citrus in there to help with the detox, or like Pamela was saying, those citrus oils, whatever you have on hand. And so if I mention something that's a single and you're like, I don't have that, but I have a blend that has that single in it, or, you know, vice versa, use what you have on hand, because it's better than not using something, right? And so grab that citrus oil or your Juva or your GLF or whatever it is. And in the front, on that right-hand side, under that lowest part of your rib cage, get in a habit of massaging topically that oil on at least once a day, and that'll help us with that liver clearing. Our other supplement, which may, you know, surprise you unless you're specifically working to support that thyroid, our Thyromin is phenomenal for just regular thyroid support. And so you don't have to have a thyroid issue, because again, we're talking wellness and just general support with that. But when we talk liver and gallbladder pretty much function as one organ, even though we talk about them separately. There is a little duct in there that opens up to get these hormones out of that liver and clear them into the intestines. If our thyroid levels are low, which a large majority of the population is, regardless of what lab work says or does not, that duct will stay contracted. And guess what? The stuff that needs to get out doesn't. And so when we utilize something to support the endocrine system, like that Endoflex oil, or then taking it and kicking it up a notch, the Thyromin, which do your own research. I personally took that during pregnancy and felt great doing so. Making sure that those thyroid levels are optimally supported, make sure that those ducts are open to get that hormone that needs out and supposed to be filtered into the digestive system and out of the body, which of course we have to have consistent bowel movements into. And then, like I said, our mineral essence, if you were going to focus on, which we'll get into in a little bit in pregnancy, because what's the top question? Okay, what prenatal do you recommend? And Young Living's not going to label something a prenatal, right? Because a prenatal, again, is like a medical mindset of like, how can you prescribe to me my exact numbers that I need? And so we're not going to do that. I'm going to talk about foundational things that if you maybe aren't getting that through your diet or aren't getting enough of it, Young Living has some products that can come alongside you and help with that. And so we'll talk about some foundational things, but heavy hitters, especially as we're looking into pregnancy, making sure that both mom and dad are taking in at least a dose a day of mineral essence is huge, because those stressors will also deplete our minerals, and we need those minerals for functions, right? Okay. So top on those male hormone support, when we were talking about with males, mainly just one hormone that we're looking at, if we're just going to hone in and focus for him, is going to be what? Our testosterone, which you guys are familiar with. And like I said, typically those are going to cycle through in a 24-hour period. His hormones are normally going to be highest at a morning time. And so if we're physiologically going, when can I utilize these oils to support what the hormones are naturally doing? He may be able to tell symptom-wise off of how his body is functioning when things readings are the highest or not, or if he needs some extra support. But you don't need lab work for this. Again, that's another like medical allopathic mindset. If you have it, great, but I still want you to look at how you're feeling and how you're responding to these products. And that way you'll know when to utilize them and whether you need to try something else. And so some great product support for him. Again, females are going to have testosterone levels, even though it's lower than males. And so if you're like, hey, I'd like to support this too, then yes, females can absolutely use these. And again, that's another beautiful thing about working with plants. So Mr. Shutran and Idaho Blue Spruce would be the top for him. And then supplement wise, one of our like unsung heroes that I love both for male and female, especially when we're talking about the endocrine system, is our Power Guys. And so you guys may have heard it for athletes more. It is fantastic for males, but the adaptogens, which do what they're named for, just help your body adapt to stress in there, are great for females too. And so you can try it and see how your body does with that. But I would prioritize starting with the Thyromin first and see how you do with that. And then if you want to add another one in, but those three for males are some great oil blends. And then the Idaho Blue Spruce is a single that he can try. And then for the female, yes, we're a little bit more complicated because there's some more hormones in there. And then I told you guys, we're looking at typically like month long. If you can learn how to read what's going on with your cycles, sometimes that's through mucus, sometimes it's through temperature, but look at resources like that, taking control of your fertility to know specifically what your body's doing. You will hear with our Progestance Plus, which is one of our favorite serums that comes up when we're talking about hormones. And I have had so many testimonials from women who are like, that stuff changed my life. It was developed by a fantastic medical doctor, and it really is phenomenal. It's not a true essential oil, it's a serum. And so it does different than just an essential oil. And that's why sometimes the testimonials are like, man, I could really notice because that's really strong. Caveat on that too, you can at your comfort, so do your own research, use it in pregnancy. If you've used it before, I would not stop the use of it before I had lab work to know what my body's doing. And so I would definitely keep on that one because we don't want to see a vast drop in that progesterone from the Progestance Plus if you come off of that, because the body knows to stay pregnant because it starts releasing more progesterone once pregnancy is achieved. And so just stay on that. But in reading it, you will hear, hey, it's a lot simpler than other progesterone because you can stay on it your whole cycle. And while that's true, if I have my preference, love to know what a female cycle is doing exactly by her monitoring that through the month and then supporting with that progestance from ovulation on to when her next period starts, because that's just more physiologically accurate. And then if she were to conceive, go ahead and use it through the pregnancy, and then if she's working with a provider who's familiar with that. If not, when you're interviewing, to me, that's something important that I want to make sure me and my provider who's coaching and guiding me along this pregnancy are on the same page and well-versed in that. And if they're not, maybe I'm just doing my own research and making my own choices in that instead of having them walk alongside me in something that they're unfamiliar with. But that is where the progestance, I would use it in the second half of her cycle. And then in the first, because we talked about estrogen being the key player there, looking at blends like Dragon Time, Sclerescent, or the straight clary sage, which is going to be more supportive of those estrogenic times. And so again, those are ones that you could use through the entire time. Once pregnancy is achieved, not that it's like, oh my goodness, it's this danger thing, but I just personally wouldn't use things with clary sage or that are in the blend in early pregnancy. I would save those off towards closer to time when baby is ready to come. And so again, that's just a personal preference as far as physiologically supporting the body. Okay, let's talk about, and you can absolutely still utilize that for preconception, but in pregnancy, the areas where we want to focus on nutrition and supplements, and then maybe some oils specific for that, just trying to give you guys some high points because I know that there is a lot. Ningxia Red, if you haven't heard about it and you're new to this world and you're like, what supplement should I try? That is an all-star. It is fantastic for when the digestive system may be under a little bit of stress, like in pregnancy, because you don't have to swallow a pill. I love it for kids too. My kids can clearly show you that they had it their whole pregnancy because they all love it. And so I have to be like, hey, you can't drink the whole bottle in one setting. But it is what we name our hippie high C. And if there is like moods with the hangry going on, I love Ningxia for that because it is fantastic for support of blood sugar, for health of that liver and just overall digestive support. Unlike your typical fruit or juice supplements, it has the entire berry in there. And so you've got the fiber and not just the juice, which is key in that whole digestive and blood sugar support. But then also your Ningxia wolfberry is higher in protein concentration than your other fruit. And you will hear a lot as you look into pregnancy dietary recommendations, protein, protein, protein. That is because proteins are building blocks. And what are you doing? Building your body to grow in a baby, right? And so Ningxia is fantastic for that reason. And so that would be a top recommendation. Our multigreens, again, you can choose what you want to do on a prenatal. My choices have been to get that from my diet and then support that with supplements. And so our multigreens is another one. I have so many moms who try this and they're like, my energy levels, I will not be off of that. Google bee pollen benefits, because not only is it infused with our essential oils, you've got awesome greens in there, which you know are important in pregnancy, but then your bee pollen benefits come into play big in there. Your super bee, our super bee is methylated. All that means is that a lot of people can't handle vitamins that aren't. Methylated is closer to the type that you would get in food when we're talking B vitamins. And your B vitamins are basically the energy source for all of the processes that have to go on in the body. And so when you hear a mom who's pregnant, like, oh, I'm just a little tired, I'm lagging behind, it's usually because her body is doing a lot, right? And so we add in those B vitamins just to get a little extra oomph and provide her with the energy that all of those chemical processes need. And we see a world of difference. And so that is really, really important. Mineral essence, which I already touched on. With that, you want to look at the benefits of royal jelly. And then also just salt content is really important in pregnancy. And so that, and then like our electrolyte drops are really important, but that mineral essence would be key. If you just cannot stomach it and you're like, I won't do it, try mixing it in like a citrus juice or your Ningxia, or you can start with it topically, like in a bath, but we really want to get you ingesting that because it is really important. And I even do it on my kids. It is fantastic for supporting sleep. And so if that is something that is off in pregnancy, that can be really big. And then the other one is our Super C chewable. I prefer the chewable over the other tablet just because it's more of a whole food source. Really important for circulation, which as she's growing a baby, obviously that becomes important. Her skin is stretching, her center of gravity is changing, and so circulation is really key. And then for growth and repair, obviously we're doing that with pregnancy and birth, right? And it also helps her absorb her nutrients. And so you may be focused on diet, but if we're not doing things like enzymes and these vitamin C's to help absorb the nutrients, then we're wasting some of that, right? All right, so some of the heavy hitters in pregnancy, something that if you're new to the essential world, you may have not heard this before, but is one of the coolest things to me. I can bring up different timelines in your life and you will likely have some sort of smell situation attached to that memory. And that is because our olfactory smell system is so huge, and we can use our essential oils, especially in a time like pregnancy and then bringing a baby on to our benefit as to how we work on our emotions and our feeling and how we start bonding with babies. This has been really important to me during my pregnancies, but then also with our baby that we adopted because I didn't share that time of pregnancy with him. And so to help bring about that bond was here. And so, okay, sorry if you guys will keep on the mute for me because I'm getting a little bit of feedback with that. But one of our blends that you will hear a lot about this smell and bonding is our gentle baby. And so you could put that in the diffuser. It is diluted and gentle enough for mom to utilize on her belly. Not only is she going to get the topical benefits of that on her skin, but after this whole 2020 craziness, some of you may have gone through experiences where you're like, hey, my smell just isn't what it was before. And you may think, or maybe you came into this pre-2020 and you're like, my smell, wasn't great. And so will these oils benefit me? Something that is so cool is that, did you know that our cells and our organs have a sense of smell? And so that may be subconscious to you, and you may not realize, like, as you're breathing stuff in, yes, you smell, but your cells and your organs are working, even if your nose doesn't feel like it is working that great. And developmentally, the baby starts to develop its sense of smell at 10 weeks. And so most moms, that pregnancy test, they'll typically on average like find out at about 6 to 8 weeks that they're expecting, right? And a couple of weeks later, baby is already developing its sense of smell. And so what are you doing as you work through in pregnancy with that gentle baby using those topical applications, or maybe you're choosing frankincense or another favorite oil? If you don't have oils on hand, grab one of those starter kits and just use one of the oils in there that you gravitate towards for this topical application. During my pregnancies, after the first, like you have your hopes and dreams with that first, and so you can use, you know, your affirmations and your verses and the things that you want to focus on, because the world is going to constantly throw negativity at you, right? And so you want to ground yourself and focus on the areas that you choose. But I joke that I'm like, man, after the first, when that second pregnancy test turned positive, I was like, that ignorance was bliss. Can you take me back there? And so maybe you're working on some things that you want to have go differently that second or third or fourth time around. And so I love that as we build into our habits, whether it's topical application or diffusing, we can sit there and read things or affirm stuff or focus, you know, on pictures. And we're using this olfactory sense of smell, not only to work on mom, but then that's working on baby and their bonding, because then baby comes out and we utilize that gentle baby or whatever oil we chose in our diffuser or as we're massaging on baby, and that whole bond is already rolling. So cool. And so that is one of my favorite ones. If you are in the Young Living world and you mentioned pregnancy, you will likely hear about a spray called Clariderm. When you look at the price on that, you may be like, oh, I can DIY it myself. Or you might say to yourself, like, is it worth it? You guys, I can tell you as a mom and as a birth worker, that spray is so worth it. And so definitely make the investment to budget that in. It is also one that not only can you start utilizing if you are hearing this like before you're pregnant or early in pregnancy, grab it, because you can utilize it on your bottom just to get your skin ready. You can utilize it on your belly. And then that same thing with the scent hole circulation, I mean, with your brain and the affirmations and everything applies with the use of that. But then guess what? Once baby's here, mom can use it postpartum still and get all the benefits of the awesome oils that are in that spray. But then we use it on scrapes and cuts, and my kids just love it for comfort on their skin. And then I'll often like grab it if I don't have my seedlings or whatever diaper cream that I have on hand to use. And so it definitely like so budget friendly. You can spritz it in your peri bottle, which if you, side note, don't have a peri bottle, clean out one of your Young Living dishwashing soaps, the little dispensers, works great as a peri bottle. Just make sure that you clean that out really well. Or you can grab one of those new Frida bottles if you want to get fancy, but you can get a couple spritzes of that Clariderm in there, so you're not having to DIY. Your gentle baby works great in there as a blend too, and then top it off with the rest of your water, and then use that as a rinse on your bottom every time. Or you can just spray and utilize the Clariderm straight without doing that. But that is one that you definitely want to invest in pregnancy and have on hand. What's something else that we already touched on a lot with pregnancy? Digestive support. And so if that nausea is coming up because baby's like, hey, I need you to make some changes, your Aroma Ease is a great blend for that. You will hear peppermint a lot. If those two are too strong for you, try spearmint. Spearmint is also great for supporting that thyroid. And so that may be why you crave that if you do, but those are fantastic, both in early pregnancy, if that nausea is coming up then, and then a lot of women, myself included, in labor because of the vast changes in your hormones that you get really quickly during that. If nausea comes up again, those are great to have on hand. In labor, make sure that we're not applying oils to, say, a favorite pillowcase, or like putting it in water if she's laboring in a bath in an area that she can't, as she changes through her labor pattern. If she decides like, hey, I no longer like that oil anymore. Hey, that scent, I was enjoying it and now it's making me nauseous. We want to think about that. And so put those either in a diffuser or on a Kleenex, or maybe she's, you know, huffing it straight from the bottle, just something that we can move out of that room if her likes and wants change, because sometimes that can happen in there too. And so that is something really important to mention. Sleep can come up as an issue that needs some more support, especially as hormones change. And then later on, you can utilize these tricks for babies too. Cedarwood and lavender would be my tops for that, even though we have a ton of choices in Young Living. With babies, little mom tip here. You've heard like, hey, get your bedtime routine down. And so something is a routine because it starts telling the brain, whether it's a bath or a book, With this, what we just mentioned with the olfactory, yes, it is a strong trick to use that sense of smell. And so when we want that baby to start winding down and say like, hey, this is bedtime, and you can absolutely start that routine in pregnancy, that diffuser goes on and baby gets accustomed to that scent. And so utilizing the same one in the same area, hey, this is wanting to stimulate you towards sleep, right? Skin may be an area that needs support, especially as things stretch, and might have some sensitivities that we didn't have before because it's thin on mom, just like on a baby. Gary formulated our Tender Tush formula. And so you guys for diaper cream may be more familiar with our seedlings. It's thicker, has more like of a zinc base, whereas our Tender Tush is more of a runny consistency. He formulated that specifically to support Mary's skin through her pregnancy. And so you could absolutely grab that for pregnancy skin support and then have it on hand later on to use on baby skin. It is fantastic. And so that would be some great. My top one, if you're not utilizing Gentle Baby for skin support, cypress is fantastic for circulation. And so if you're needing it for that, but frankincense is my top favorite for skin oil. And then we can use that on anointing and bonding with baby too. Headaches may be another one that you might need support with as those hormones shift and change. That is totally normal. And I just told you guys all the stuff that the liver goes through. And so sometimes we might have some tension in that, and that comes up a lot hormonally. And so our M-Grain blend or our CBD Soothe are a couple of favorites for that. Again, research what's in those blends as to whether or not you're comfortable utilizing those both in pregnancy and then postpartum as those hormones regulate. It's great to put them on the temples, just make sure that we're not too close to the eyes. But having those in your toolbox, it is so empowering when you come into symptoms that tell you that your body needs some support. And then we mentioned that Clariderm for labor. Another great one for labor is our Valor, right? Because it helps us do brave things. It has the frequency of our joints, which is why it's nicknamed that chiropractor in a bottle. And so do you think her joints are under stress as she's making room, whether it's a surgical birth or a vaginal birth, things are moving right. And so that Valor is great for support. Our lip balms, you guys, this may be like a funny thing to say, but our lavender lip balm is one of my favorites for this. In birth, not only do so many moms mention how much they want that because she may, with her breathing and stuff, have dry mouth and want that on her lips, but it can double as a carrier stick, both on mom and on baby. And so if we're putting repetitive pressure in labor or utilizing an oil over and over again, and her skin is sensitive, having that lip balm might not only be useful for facial purposes, but also to double as a carrier stick. And so I love that. White Angelica, again, in birth, you may not be in control of who is coming in and out. And then for babies, my 2020 baby, she was, even though we were in an open area and still doing life, she was in a world that was a little bit crazier than the rest were, right? And so just to ground her, if she's acting stressed, I love having White Angelica. And so same reason, that's an invaluable oil to have on hand during labor. If you've watched an animal labor, if you bring stress into that room or move that animal, what happens? Things stall out. And so that White Angelica is a fantastic one to ground. And then looking at our whole feelings kit, feelings obviously massively involved in this. There was a lot of talk in the birth world, and I'll close with this and then just tell you 2 lines to check out for the infants, because I know we covered a lot and I'm giving you guys a short on that, but everything that we mentioned in this affects the babies too. In the birth world, there was a lot of talk in 2020 about birth positions being affected and just labors, being a little bit more difficult than what they had been before. And I think we can say 2 reasons in looking at that when we analyze it. A lot of people changed. And so like for me, my vocation, chiropractic, in the pre-2020 world, when I would have been in the office full time, if I came home, that chances are would have found me a little bit more sedentary than up in my office, right? And so physical routines changed. And so we didn't have the work of gravity on a baby to work with physicians. And then outside of that, emotionally, what happened? The outside world was fear, 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 right? And so what does that tell a baby, whether that's the fear of the crazy 2020 or that's the fear of you just emotionally for whatever reason? We want to utilize things like our feelings kit and the resources in these communities to work through emotions, whether you're a person that loves doing all that stuff or you're like, this is weird, I don't want to talk about my feelings. Well, guess what? You can either unpack those during pregnancy, or if they haven't come up, chances are in labor and then in infancy, as you walk into that parenthood journey, the world is going to find a way to help you unpack that. We can either do it by choice or it can be done like to us and taking us on that journey, right? Instead of us choosing it. And so I love that we have these tools that can make that a little bit simpler and more comfortable. And we can take our time through that instead of it being forced on us at once. Because if a baby, they are so smart in utero and they are created to get in a position in order to say, hey, now it's my time. And mom's hormones are saying this and my organs are saying I'm ready. I can get in a position to come out. If the world is saying, hey, it's a scary place out here, and mom and dad's emotions, which baby is soaked in mom's hormones the whole time, are saying, nope, what's that baby going to do? Turn in the exact opposite position. And then we're going to run into issues, whether that is through labor or birth or through things that were done through that. So I hope that is helpful for you guys. Once baby is here, same thing that we talked about with looking at fragrances and those synthetic chemicals, but we have a whole line that is your easy button now that we didn't used to have, our kid scents. The kit that is the starter kit that comes with that crazy cute owl diffuser does come with little rollers that you can put on them, but that kit is great to start with because you can diffuse those oils and then use them topically, whether you're just doing it the old fashioned way or putting a roller on there. But there is a roller kit that comes with them made as roll-ons without a diffuser. And so talk to the person that invited you to that call. They are a great place to start because they are named for what you would want to use them to support. So sniffles, I want to support breathing, I'm going to go to that. Tummy jives, I want to support digestion, I'm going to go to that. And so for your easy button, they are pre-diluted for your babies. When you're starting on babies, especially if this is something that you get your system used to during pregnancies, you don't have to be fearful. There are plenty of other things that I can think of that I would be cautious about utilizing on my child, but oils would not be one. And then if you get an effective oil use on them that you're like, hey, I really didn't like that, then we have a carrier oil that you can help to dilute that after the fact. And so enjoy this, use it to your health benefit on that wellness journey. Don't come at it from a place of fear because there's so many that have had successful stories with this. And so we want you to experience that too. And so hopefully this and other recommendations in this community can help you. So, all right, Pamela, is there anything that I missed that you can think of?
No, I was trying to answer things in the chat and add a little things here and there. That was beautiful. Take a breath because it's a lot.
I'm good. I told y'all it sounds a lot.
I totally get you and do the exact same thing. So I honor that. And people were loving all of it and saying that they wanted to listen over and over. And you all will have the opportunity to do that. We do have one question if we can answer really quick. Do you work with people on fertility long distance? They want to know.
I have stuff coming in the future for that. Not currently. I'm working on some different new stuff. So
where's the easiest way for them to keep in touch with you? Is it through Instagram? We post
Instagram would be, yeah, I see the Instagrams the most. So yeah.
Okay.
And if you guys want to drop, because this is so like, I learned about this stuff from other people doing that. And so it is not salesy to share with your friends. And that's why we get on and do these calls. Most of y'all aren't on our teams. And so totally snap, like the easiest way to share this, social media travels so fast, right? And so snap a picture right now, like grab your phone. Nobody's going to judge you for that. Doesn't have to look pretty. And just like drop the biggest nugget that you learned tonight or the one change that you're choosing to make or share on that picture. And then we would love for you to tag us, Pamela, if you haven't dropped yours in there, and then whoever invited you to this call, tag them on Instagram. My handle is drcindyh. And so if you'll tag us on there, then we'll share it. And that is just a great way to get stuff to travel for people that weren't on this call. And then they can absolutely ask you for the link to the recording because we'll be sharing that too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop this recording.